on foundational skills, 5 ways to build the cornerstone for proficient reading. I'm Doug Kavlich with McGraw-Hill Education, and I will be the webinar moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. The webinar is being presented in listen-only mode, which means you'll be able to hear the presenter, but they won't be able to hear you. However, that doesn't mean you cannot participate. We'll be offering opportunities for you to ask questions and give feedback throughout the webinar, so please type that into your toolbar in the questions area, and we'll be happy to see that come in and address anything. Joining us today is Dr. Marcia Reut. Dr. Reut is one of the authors of the Open Court Reading Program and the past director of professional development for SRA McGraw-Hill. She has spent a significant amount of time in classrooms developing reading and writing curricula, as well as working with teachers and administrators in the implementation of instructional practices. Marcia, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, I feel like I need to welcome everyone. I don't know who you are out there, but welcome, and I'm delighted that you're joining us today. We're going to be talking today about something that I think many of us are familiar with, but it is always good to reinforce solid ideas and perhaps present some new ways of teaching them to children. And what we're going to be talking about today are foundational skills, 5 ways to build the cornerstone for proficient reading, or so what else is new? Because I know a lot of people feel we've talked about this, and yet we still know that in classrooms across the country there are children who need these foundational skills. I love this cartoon, and I think Marisa is out there, one of my colleagues from the past, and she knows that I love to do cartoons. And it says, "The cloud ate my homework." And you know, the reality is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. And that's very true about the research that we're going to be talking about today regarding these foundational skills. We know that foundational skills are absolutely critical for reading complex text. And that's what we're talking about in this day and age, that we want our students to be able to access text, to analyze text, and then to use that content to build their own knowledge and to prepare them for the world that they are going to be functioning in, the complex world that they're going to be functioning in. And yet, we know that these complex skills, that these complex texts are critical to read, yet without decoding, you can't read challenging text. You can understand it perhaps if it's read to you, but you have to be able to read it. Without word structure skills, knowledge of word parts, prefixes, affixes, time is lost for many of our students in content area reading. And without fluency, you cannot read and understand challenging text. And I just chose a piece of challenging text, and it's from Crime and Punishment. Not that I would present this to young children, but I think for our purposes, it's a way to take a look at how these foundational skills play into reading complex skills. So if we take a look at the first word, Raskolnikov, we can attack that through phonics. We can read that word comfortably and confidently. If we take a look at wretchedness, we can make sense out of that word because we know the base and because we can connect the base to the suffix and get meaning. And then you can see there's a sentence that's highlighted in green, and that is all about fluency. It's a long sentence. It's a complex sentence. And when we read that fluently, we need to read it in chunks so we get meaning out of what we are reading. Complex text requires foundational skills. According to the Common Core State Standards, foundational skills cover a range of activities from print and phonological awareness to decoding and word analysis. And these skills are totally essential to building fluency and comprehension. And while they are often taught sequentially, they can also overlap. For example, as we are teaching the critical skills of print awareness, as we are working with phonological awareness. We may start out doing it in a parallel path, but gradually that path is going to shift, and we're going to actually connect sounds, phonological awareness, to letters, print awareness. So these will come together. So they will be overlapping, but many of them will start out individually. What do we need to understand about these foundational skills? They are all language-based, whether they're oral language or written language. Almost all of them are developmental in nature. The fact is, we know that there is a sequence in how to teach phonological awareness, and how to teach print awareness, and how to work with phonics and prefixes and suffixes. And we need to take advantage of that knowledge in order to help our students use the information at the points in time that's most effective for them. These skills are also predictable. I know many people feel that the English language is not predictable, that it doesn't make sense. Well, in fact, one of the things that we do as we teach phonics to our children is to have them recognize the predictability of our English language. And we're going to be talking more about that. And the other lovely thing about all of these skills is they are very teachable. All these skills, whether we're talking about print concepts, phonemic awareness, decoding, word analysis, or fluency, are absolutely connected to meaning. They are intertwined, and because children acquire these and become proficient in them, they are able to read text in a meaningful way. So let's talk a little bit about the what, the why, and the how of these foundational skills. Print and alphabetic knowledge. I think most of us are very familiar with this, knowing the concepts of print, learning the alphabet, and being flexible in learning the alphabet. So we know which letters come before one another, and the children don't have to go through the alphabet from the very beginning every time someone asks, what's the letter after M? We want our students to be able to identify the letters and form the letters. These are solid predictors of later success in reading. And we're going to get back to that idea of the more things change, the more they stay the same, because this has been a solid finding over decades. And then we want our students to know how those letters work together to create words in print that they will then use that knowledge as they are working with reading. Why? Knowing letters allows students to connect sounds to letters. If you don't know the letters, even if you know the sounds, then you are connecting the sounds to something arbitrary and pretty meaningless. We know that forming letters supports alphabetic knowledge and early writing. The research is pretty clear that as students learn to write the letters, they are constantly reinforcing concepts about the letter itself and its name. And just as print awareness, or being able to write letters, predicts later success, having alphabetic knowledge, knowing how our alphabet works, also predicts later success in reading and writing. So what are some things that we can do? Because practicality is really what this is all about. Well, one of the things that we can do is to sing the alphabet song. And we all do that, but I think we need to realize that there's a real purpose behind singing the alphabet song, because it provides a conceptual hook for children to hang knowledge about letters onto when they learn to form those letters and as they learn to connect sounds to those letters. We want our students to learn both upper and lowercase letters. And you know, it's so funny because we always think that children have to learn 26 letters of the alphabet, and they have to learn how to write those 26 letters. Well, the alphabet song absolutely has 26 letters, but they have to learn to write. Children have to learn to write more than 26 letters. Uppercase O and lowercase o are formed exactly the same. So that's one letter that never changes, upper or lowercase. But let's take a look at letters like lowercase a and uppercase a. They're two totally different forms of the same letter. They do not look the same, and yet children need to learn to form these for reading and to form them for writing. And then once children do know about letters, they need to know how they work, that they can spell anything, that these letters, these remarkable 26 letters that they are learning, allows them to write, to spell any single word they speak. That's incredible power. And then we want children to explore how these letters work together to make sense. So let's take the word most. And one of the things that we can do, because we want our children up and moving and actively involved, is to give them different letters of the alphabet and make them responsible for it. So as a teacher, I write the word most on the blackboard or on the chalkboard or whatever board we're working with these days. And then the child who has the letters will come up and stand underneath their respective letters. Reading the word again, most, spelling the word M-O-S-T, helps children realize that these 4 letters make a word. But there's something equally important that we can do. If we take the word post, the last 3 letters remain the same, the first one changes, and now we have a new word. When we change a letter, we change the meaning of the word. And you can take those same 4 letters and just reorganize them to write the word stop. So now children are learning in a very active and engaging way that if you change a letter, the meaning changes. If you change the order of those very same letters, the meaning changes as well. Phonological and phonemic awareness, another one of those foundational skills. And this really focuses on children manipulating language, starting out developmentally with sentences, moving to words, parts of words, and sounds. And one of the reasons that we really need to focus on phonological and phonemic awareness is because children don't consciously do that. When we learn to speak, we speak words. We focus on meaning. We don't have to teach children that speech is about meaning. But when you learn to read, you need to be able to reflect on language, to know the sounds of the language so you can connect them up to those letters of the alphabet that we just talked about in print awareness, and then use those sounds and letters to read words. There is a developmental progression, just as there was for print awareness. And in fact, one of the things that we're going to start with, as I said, is using sentences and breaking sentences into words, breaking words into parts and parts into syllables. And then we can do counting syllables. Children love to do this very automatically. We then move to more discrete parts of language, phonemic awareness, the individual sounds, and we start working with blending those sounds into words and then segmenting those sounds into parts. All of these skills are remarkably teachable. Now, I need to say right up front, there are some children who come with this understanding of phonological and phonemic awareness, but not all children do. And for those children who don't come with those skills, 15 minutes a day in kindergarten does incredible things to develop that phonemic awareness when we are teaching it sequentially. And if children come into first grade without it, we need to start first grade working on phonological and phonemic awareness and then fading it out so it becomes intertwined with phonics. Again, that overlap that we talked about earlier. So why do we need this phonological and phonemic awareness? Well, it's going to support that alphabetic principle. The alphabetic principle tells us that sounds are attached to letters or spellings or graphemes, and that when we combine those together, we can read words. And unless you understand the concept of letters and the concepts of sounds, putting those two together becomes very difficult for many children. Once children understand the alphabetic principle, the connection of sounds to letters or spellings, and they can use this knowledge to read words, then they can begin to truly focus on comprehension. And I will add spelling. So, the how of phonological and phonemic awareness. Well, we talked about identifying individual words and sentences, and I think children should have fun doing this. Give them sentences. Let them give you sentences, and for every word in the sentence, they can clap, they can move, they can take a step, they can do whatever. Use words and put them in pocket charts, but get children to appreciate the fact that sentences, which is all about meaning, is made up of discrete words. We want children to attend to and produce rhymes, and you'll notice that I have rhymes spelled here, R-H-Y-M-E-S, and that means that the ending sounds are the same, not necessarily spelled the same. So blue and two and few and hue and igloo all rhyme. One of the caveats that we have to keep in mind is that when we are doing these activities with children, we do them orally, because the minute you put words on the board that are spelled differently, children get very confused and they're saying, these don't rhyme. Now, this is distinctly different from rhyme spelled R-I-M-E, as in at, sat, mat, cat, and pat, so on, where the spelling is exactly the same. We want to segment words into parts and syllables, and children just love clapping syllables, and they do this almost automatically. Again, this is an oral activity, because breaking words into syllables when you're reading requires spelling knowledge. This only requires listening skills. We want to blend phonemes to make words. And as we are blending those phonemes, one of the things that we want to keep in mind is that we say the sounds clearly and cleanly, that we don't say the sound for the letter B as B, but B. So children don't get that additional vowel sound attached to it. Otherwise, they would say the word, big, they might blend it as B, G. And it isn't, it's just big. Then we're going to segment words into individual parts, and then do some pretty sophisticated activities that really children don't hang on to and do comfortably until first grade, where we're going to add, delete, and substitute sounds. So if I said the word mat, and I change the a to I, the word would be mit. If I said the word tray, that's a substitution. If I said the word tray and I said take off the initial sound, delete it, that would be a new word, and the word would be ray. So children learn to manipulate sounds in a very positive way. And the amazing thing is that this understanding of letters and this understanding of sounds allow children to become good spellers. If you take a look at this little piece by a kindergarten child. It's last Friday, me and my grandma and my grandpa. And I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just look at grandma and grandpa. It's not spelled correctly, but for every sound in the word, they have a letter. This really shows true understanding of letter knowledge, phonemic awareness, and a child who is truly ready to go on to learning the alphabetic principle. So let's go on to decoding and phonics. And phonics still today, it's amazing to me, is getting somewhat of a bad rap, but that's okay. The research, again, the more things change, the more they stay the same. The research is still remarkably clear and consistent that children who learn how to read, knowing the sounds and the spellings of language, are better readers at the end of first grade, oftentimes at the end of third grade. And I think the other thing that's remarkable about the research on children who have learned phonics is that they are more confident readers. They will take a word and try to read it even if it is something that is totally unfamiliar to them, because they have the tools to read words. So phonics is a method of teaching reading that connects sounds to spellings, and I'm saying spellings because the reality is that it's more than just a letter. The sound of d, as in dad, is just represented by one letter, the letter D. But if you take the vowel sound in road, R-O-A-D, you have more than one letter representing the long O. So one of the things we want to do is to say to children, we're talking about sounds and how those sounds are spelled. And the nice thing is that that automatically connects it up to writing, because what children learn in phonics can absolutely be used in writing. I really want to emphasize one point, and it is a critical point. Phonics is not a set of rules. There are variations, there are subtleties in English, and the reality is there are dialectical variations in English. So we can't expect children to say the word the same way we do all the time. Having lived in the South, I know that children will oftentimes say A-L-L and O-I-L exactly the same way. But that doesn't mean they aren't reading the words correctly, and they will have to learn which spellings to use in order to write those words correctly. There are some other things when we say there aren't absolutes. We know in English that words don't end in the letter V. So you add an E to that word. So love is not love, it's love. On the other hand, we have live and live, and these are just the kinds of variations that we need to teach children, but there are far fewer of them than we have ever given English credit for. So what we want to do is teach children how to use the sounds that they're learning in phonemic awareness and the letters that they're learning in alphabetic awareness in order to read and understand the alphabetic principle. We want to also appreciate the fact that this is going to help children understand English much better. And you know, it often helps us understand English much better. Knowing how to decode a word supports word recognition and fluency, and therefore comprehension. So let's just take a quick look at a couple of those understandings of English that we can teach children, not by saying in English you have to do this or that because of words that have this or that derivation, but just by giving them some clues. And we can do that by systematically and explicitly teaching phonics. And I want to say two very important points about this. Systematic means that there is an order to how we teach the sounds and spellings. There is a developmental progression out there that tells us, or certainly a set of common beliefs that tells us, you start with common consonants and short vowels. We want our children to see that one-to-one relationship right away. So short A is A, and it's usually spelled, and it is spelled with an A. If we teach consonants like M, B, S, T, L, and short vowels A and I, children can read a lot of words right away using their phonics knowledge. After short vowels are taught and common consonants, we can go on to those that are less common. The R-controlled vowels, the long vowels that have multiple spellings. And then, of course, there are always the digraphs and the diphthongs. and those develop over time. But children, by calling it spellings, really realize that AI says A, and that is the way we can spell it. And then we want to teach children how to use those sounds and spellings to read and spell. That means we need to explicitly teach them how to do this. This is not, and I really want to underscore this, not a script. Explicit instruction means we explain to our children about the sounds and the letters and how they work. We model this by modeling blending for children so they see how they can combine sounds and spellings to read words. Now remember, children have had experience with blending when they were blending sounds in phonemic awareness. So this is just taking blending to the next level. We need to scaffold learning. Some children will require more support than others. And this is why we have small group instruction. This is why we meet individual needs. We need to do that scaffolding for those children who need it. But the ultimate goal of all of our instruction, whether it's about phonics, whether it's about fluency, whether it's about comprehension, it doesn't matter. The goal is always to turn the responsibility for learning over to our students so they know how to use the different skills that they are learning in service of reading and writing. And then we want to connect it up, as I said, to spelling. So let's take a quick look at some of those predictable things in English. CK, the sound K, never comes at the beginning of an English word. That's remarkably predictable, and I'm emphasizing English. So that CK that says K right away is now relegated to the end of a word or syllable. Usually CK is found in pack, pick, ticket, socket. When K is directly, when the K sound, is directly preceded by a short vowel. So now children right away know when it comes to reading this word, it's going to be a short vowel once they see the CK. And it also lets them know that it's going to be CK when they are spelling a word like pack and pick and so on. More than one syllable, the K is spelled as C when it comes at the end, as in traffic and electric and picnic. There is great consistency in our language. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to teach children that, but they can certainly learn that a short vowel, if there's a short vowel, the K sound is going to be spelled CK. And then when K comes after another consonant, as in silk and basket, it's going to be spelled K. There's a lot of consistency in our English language. And we can help children learn that consistency by giving them clues. They can learn that CK comes at the end of a word or syllable when it is preceded by a short vowel. It is spelled CK. If there's a multi-syllable word and the K is at the end, it's going to be spelled C. We need to give our children more credit than we do for understanding how our language works. And I want to say one thing about practicing all of this decoding that we're teaching children. We should be using decodable text, which contains a large number of words that have the sounds and spellings that the children have been taught. This is also the perfect opportunity for teaching children high-frequency sight words, so we can make language sound natural. The focus in reading these decodable texts is to practice sounds and spellings and blending to see those patterns that they've been learning, whether it's a CK or an OA or an AI or whatever, in words. And the more they see them, the more they're reinforced, the more they become part of the child's basic learning. The other thing, just as I was underscoring phonics is not an absolute, These decodable books are no substitute for any big book or other reading literacy activities that go on, particularly in kindergarten or first grade. They are practice building fluency, accuracy, automaticity. Word analysis. By the time children come to second and third grade, we really need to be shifting. If we've done our job well and taught children the sounds and spellings, how to use those sounds and spellings, how to practice them as part of reading, we need to be making a shift from working with individual sounds and spellings to working with bigger chunks, word parts that are like base words, roots, and affixes. This allows our children to read longer words comfortably, confidently, as well as to figure out the meaning of these words, because they can analyze these words. They know the meaning of the base word. They know what the prefix pre means or re means. And now when they see the word preview, they know it means to look before. And this is the kind of thinking that we want our students to be developing, so they can not only read these words, but build their vocabulary. We have to help students read those longer words. Many of you who have worked with students who are having problems with reading, they're at risk, they are not confident. You know that when they come to a longer word, let's take the word understand, they fall apart. It's a long word. They can't read it. The fact is, if you break this into parts, you can read the word. Comprehension, constellation, all of these longer words can be broken into parts, and they can be read, and the meaning can be figured out. And this is particularly critical as we get in second, third, and beyond the grades to content area reading. It improves students' understanding of English and how it works, just as phonics helps children understand English and how it works. And it's going to support fluency and therefore fluency, and I will add word meaning, and therefore comprehension. In first grade, in kindergarten, we're going to be teaching those basic inflectional endings, the plural S, the past tense, ED, and the progressive ING. In second grade, even in first grade, we can begin with morphemes or prefixes that have very stable, consistent meanings, re, un, im, over. So children, when you put re in front of view, you see review. We also want to teach morphemes, root base words that are stable. View doesn't change when you put re in front of it. It doesn't change, the spelling doesn't change when you put able at the end of it, or ed. So beginning with root words and prefixes that are consistent help students understand the concept, so then they can move on to those words that will have spelling changes. We want to teach high utility roots. And again, we're going to begin with roots that have no spelling changes. Like rupt, you put dis in front of it, the root doesn't change. Erupt, the root is spelled the same. Corrupt, excuse me, the root doesn't change. And one of the most powerful things that we can do, just as we did with phonics, is to model how to think about these parts, to take words apart, to take off the prefix, to take off the suffix, to identify the meaning of the roots and the affixes, and then reconstruct. We're going to deconstruct and reconstruct. And ultimately, students will be able to do this as they are reading, to not just read long words, but figure out the meaning. Why? Because all of this is going to help students in their content area reading, and that is absolutely critical. I'm going backwards, and I apologize. So let's take a look at how word structure supports reading, and I would like to add spelling. One of the things that always upsets many of us as educators, but then as children too, is when there are letters that are silent. And people say, well, there's no reason for that. That's just English. You know, English is one of those quirky languages, and you just have to learn it. But, you know, it's not true, because the G is silent before the end when it's in the same syllable, as in sign and design. But when you get into a multi-syllable word, like signal and signature, the G is pronounced. So one of the little tricks that you can teach children is to say the word sign. If you're not sure how to spell it, maybe you should think of one of the derivatives you know, like signal, and right away you know it's spelled S-I-G-N. Schwa. That's messy for all of us, frankly, because sometimes we don't know how to spell the schwa sound. So let's just take the word nation, and we put the derivative AL on to make it an adjective, and it's national, and AL is the schwa. So how do we spell it? AL, IL, UL? It's confusing. But if you go the next step to nationality, you know how to spell the schwa in national. Knowing how to expand words, derive words using new suffixes, helps not only with word meaning, with word reading, but also with spelling as well. And you can see how this helps too in terms of other words. We have govern, governor, government. So if you know govern, you know governor, O-R, government. Nature, natural, again, a schwa. Naturally, we know how to spell the schwa, A-L. And then there's the power of the roots, and I think we need to do much, much more with roots, particularly beginning in the third grade. We talk about expanding word knowledge. We talk about the generative nature of vocabulary. Teaching roots really does focus on that generative nature. If you know the root move, mob, then you will also know that these mean move. Then those are all connected to automobile, demote, locomotion, mobile, mobility, mobilization, and so on. Plus motor, emote, emotion, motionless. Look at the power of the roots, the Greek and Latin roots, beginning in third grade, and how they are going to help expand vocabulary. And lastly, we're going to talk quickly about fluency, and we all know about the effortless reading of words, but it's much more about accuracy and rate. It's also about clustering words together to get meaning. This is done with phrases, prepositional phrases, subjective clauses, but we need to look at text features. Fluency is critical, but not sufficient for comprehension. And this is just an example of text features. When the wheat was ripe, the little red hen asked, "Who will cut this wheat?" Now, the text feature here is the bold. "Not I," said the cat. "Not I," said the dog. "Not I," said the mouse. This gives more meaning to reading than just reading, "Not I," said the cat, "Not I," said the dog, "Not I," said the mouse. Paying attention to text features is important. And why is fluency critical? Simply because it allows us to focus on meaning. If we can read fluently, automatically, see the elements, the chunks, and understand how to read those text features, all of our energy goes to meaning. So we want to teach fluency, and along with my emphasis on phonics not being absolute, on English being quite consistent, we need to realize that fluency must be taught. Just giving children activities to read isn't sufficient. We need to explain why it's important. We need to model, and we need to scaffold. And most of you are absolutely familiar with these different activities, but the one I'd like to underscore is reading aloud. When we read aloud to our students, we are modeling fluency. And we should be reading aloud to our students regardless of grade level every day. And this is just another piece from Crime and Punishment. And you can see how you can break this into parts. He was so weary after a whole month of concentrated wretchedness and gloomy excitement. And wretchedness allows us to use our knowledge of word structure. Gloomy is a text feature because what it's telling us is the author is explaining how he is feeling. We need to teach children to attend to text features, and also to those structures, those chunks that give meaning to our reading. Don't take foundational skills for granted. Don't expect them to appear. Don't assume all children have them. We need to evaluate our students when they come in. We need to know where they're at, how they fit into the developmental sequence, and then we need to teach the skills to our children. Reading demands foundational skills. If you don't understand about sounds, you can't connect them to letters. If you can't connect sounds and letters, you cannot attack unfamiliar words to figure out if you know their meanings or to learn their meanings. And if you cannot deconstruct those longer words into parts, then you can't reconstruct them to read them fluently and to get meaning from new words. If you cannot read with accuracy, appropriate rate, and prosody, comprehension suffers. And no matter what we want the final goal to be, reading complex text, reading with deep understanding, our students can't do that until they have those solid foundational skills under their belt. And I will end with my favorite cartoons ever. It's not even a cartoon, it's something written by a first grader. Teaching isn't easy, and I know finding time in the day, particularly in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade, to teach foundational skills is often a challenge. But if we don't do that well in the early grades, our children's comprehension will suffer in the later grades. So, with that having been said, I guess, Doug, I'll turn it over to you, and you will do questions.
Thank you so much, Marcia. So right now, everybody who's on the webinar, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type those in, and we'll wait just a couple of minutes for some questions to come in. We do have Marcia, just so you know, Marisa says she's on the line, so she's there. Hello, if you like.
Well, at least there's one person I can put a face to.
Yeah, exactly. You have a little personal connection there. So it looks like we might have a few coming in.
I have to thank everyone because it's a very odd thing to do this without having people in front of you, and it must be equally as strange at the other end. So thank you for your patience.
Absolutely. A couple of people saying no questions. Thank you very much. Let's see here. Got someone else saying, missed some of the webinar, will be available for reviewing. Absolutely, Rebecca. We're recording the webinar, and we will be sending the link to the recording out to everybody who registered in an email following the webinar. So thanks. Something from, let's see, Amanda is asking, so is there a phonics program or supplemental program you would recommend for struggling readers at a fourth grade level? That's from Amanda. Marcia.
In terms of the fourth grade program, I think probably, corrective reading, which is published by McGraw-Hill, is certainly one option. And then there is a program that supports the McGraw-Hill core program, Wonders, that you could certainly use to help children move them along, the older students, very quickly. I'd like to just say one thing. When you use these programs, regardless of whether it's a McGraw program or another one, Look at the needs of the students. Don't assume that you have to drop all the way back to phonics or phonemic awareness or whatever. Many of our older students do understand the idea of sounds and letters, sounds and spellings rather. See which ones, where the holes are. It's often with the sounds that have multiple spellings. Long A spelled A-I, long A spelled A-Y, or OI spelled O-I-O-Y. Work on the sounds they need. Work on fluency, and absolutely work on morphological awareness. These students need it desperately.
Thank you, Marcia. Another question from Danny. How do we effectively, rapidly accelerate early student readers, first grade, for example, who don't even have secured alphabetic skills without putting them into an intervention program for an entire year?
Well, and I absolutely agree about not putting them into an intervention program for the entire year. I don't know what the situation is. I think sometimes we have to drop back to kindergarten and be sure that many of the phonological awareness skills and the print awareness skills are taught in kindergarten. If children come into first grade without benefit of that, and that does happen because with all the cutbacks going on now, there are half-day kindergartens or no-day kindergartens. So, I mean, it really is a challenge for first grade teachers. I think the important thing is to find a program that provides a systematic approach to teaching phonics. So you don't have any holes, you move through it quickly. Once children begin to realize that sounds are connected to these things called letters or spellings, they begin to pick it up quite quickly. You don't have to keep teaching that concept. You just have to keep teaching the new letters, the new sounds, and the new letters. But certainly the goal should be to have these children reading by the end of first grade. And I'm going to say one other thing that I know may just be a terrible thing to say. Sometimes, so any math teacher, art teacher out there, don't hate me. Sometimes we need to face the reality that we need to spend significant blocks of time with these students in order to be sure that they're reading by the end of first grade. Something may have to give, and it's a tough decision. I don't say it lightly, but the goal for all of our children should be basic reading and basic math by the end of first grade. And if they don't have those foundational skills, they're going to keep falling further and further behind.
Thank you. Let's see. Back to my questions here. We've got another question from Cynthia. Excuse me. What happens when you find an older student, say third or fourth grade, who is struggling due to weak phonemic skills? Do you go back to phonemic awareness?
It's interesting because that certainly, there is research out there that tells us that there are fourth grade students who do not understand the idea that words are made up of sounds. And again, I'm going to say you don't have to, I would not start with sentences, I would not start with words, I would start with sentences and parts of words. I would really start with phonemic awareness, talking about words being made up of individual sounds and doing activities, for example, like the Elkonin blocks, where you will say a word like silk, or so the student hears the four sounds. For every sound, moves a chit down into a box so you can see that they have moved four sounds, or four representations of those sounds. And you might even be able to do it with letters right away, so they begin to see that those sounds are connected to those letters. You can do more sophisticated activities with older students right away than you can with younger students. Because again, we can't assume that they know nothing. There's a lot that's going on in there. And for older students, it may be that we have to help them organize the information to make better sense out of the information rather than to assume it doesn't exist up there at all for them.
Thanks, Marcia. Another question, we have one from Donna. How do you explain the change in vowel sound when manipulating post to stop?
Oh, this isn't about sounds. And thank you, Donna. I mean, this is an activity that just shows students that if you change the order of the letters, you tell the students that if you change the order, you have a new word. So, for example, if I were doing that activity, I would say the word is, I'm going to go back to post, post, P-O-S-T, post. And then I sometimes will have the students stand up, move as I say each one, so it's fine. And then what they're going to do is I'm going to rewrite the word stop and have the children rearrange themselves. And I'm going to spell it again, S-T-O-P, stop. This isn't about the sounds. This is about realizing that if you change the order of letters, you change the meaning of the word, and order does matter.
So thanks, Marcia. We've got some thank yous coming in from Nancy, Carrie, Amanda. Thank you for the thank yous. We've got Amanda also is asking, any tips for students still struggling with letter reversals?
Oh, that's interesting. For children still struggling with letter reversals, sometimes I just let them use the capitals as long as just to get the words out so they don't feel stumped. The other thing, or another option, and in this day and age I think it's becoming a more significant option, is to have them do some keyboarding. Now that assumes that you have that available in the class for them to use a keyboard, so they can begin to use those letters in writing and not have to worry about the reversals. There's practice activities that can go on, but sometimes it just makes sense basically to teach B, then do a few others that are totally different, and then go back to the D or the P or the Q. So leave big spaces in between so they have a lot of practice with one before introducing the other.
Thank you. Let's see, we've got some thank yous. Let me see if there's anything else. I think that's all the questions that need addressed right now. If there's anything else that you guys have on the line, feel free to type them in before we go. So as we said before, we're going to be sending a follow-up email with the recording of this session following the webinar, a few days after the webinar. And as you exit the webinar today, there's going to be a survey, and we'd really appreciate your feedback. And also, there's lots of great questions in the webinar, so if anybody needs help, addressing anything, just mark the question about getting a follow-up from a sales rep, and we'll be able to connect you with somebody that can help you address any needs you have in your classrooms. So feel free to mark that on your way out today. If we did not get to your question or there's anything you want to follow up with us individually on, you can send us an email at webinars@mheducation.com, and we'll be able to get back to you about that. I've got a couple extra questions coming in here, so let's see if we can address those. Beth is asking, what about students who keep cementing CVC words and have trouble blending them to solve words quickly?
Could you just repeat that question? I think I missed the beginning of it.
Oh, no problem, no problem. So what about students who keep segmenting CVC words and have trouble blending them to solve words quickly?
Have trouble segmenting. I guess I'm trying to figure out, is this during a phonemic awareness activity where you give them the word mat and they have to do at, blend the word mat? That's what I'm hearing from the question.
Yeah,
if I'm wrong.
You want to confirm just quickly if that's what we're talking about, but yeah, I think that's what she's talking about.
Okay, Beth, I'm going to suggest you go back to doing something that I noted earlier for the older students, and that is using those Elkonin blocks or anything that the cubes that the children can move with letters on them, if they're at that level, or just moving them, period, where you take the word mat. All right, let's break it into parts. Move down one cube. Next sound, move it down. Last sound, t. Let's move down a cube. How many sounds? Children can see 3 sounds. All right, let's blend. T. They can even put the little blocks together and say mat. Sometimes just taking that little bit of extra time makes a big difference.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marcia. So that's it for questions for us. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Like I said, we'll be doing the follow-up email. So if you have any questions after this, feel free to email us at webinars@mheducation.com. Dr. Roy, thank you so much for your time. An honor speaking with you and having you speak to us. And
it's my pleasure and my honor.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and always an honor to have you on a webinar.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.